This podcast is brought to you by Podspot Events.
Hi everyone and welcome to Able Pod.
Families like mine are profoundly disadvantaged and they're also profoundly underrepresented. My little girl, Ileana, she's 17. She's got complex and profound disabilities. Ileana needs help to do almost everything. Families like mine, which are that tired, there's a bit of shame in it as well. They don't want you to know that they've struggled. They don't want you to know they haven't had a holiday. We came up under a different system. The NDIS is a dreamland. It's like dream world for disabilities. Disability can be hard, but there's also another side of the coin. There's just the most incredible lesson in gratitude, 15 minutes into meeting my daughter. It's all over our website. We're just trying to rebuild a more positive, beautiful culture. And when you have staff that learn this within your organisation, they stay because they feel good. I owe it to my daughter. I owe it to all the families coming up behind me.
Well, hi everyone and thanks for tuning in to Able Pod. It's lovely to have you back. I hope you've been enjoying these podcasts as much as I have been hosting them. We are the podcast channel on behalf of Able Plus. We do disability networking events Australia-wide in disability, aged care and school leavers with disability. So I hope you come along to one of our events. We've got 70 happening this year, so there's every chance we're coming to a community near you. Today, I'm lucky. I've got someone sitting opposite me that has a fantastic energy. Amy Gray.
Thank you.
From Disability Culture Crew Australia. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the channel. Thanks for being here. Tell us why get involved in the disability sector. What is DCCA? And tell us everything.
Right, well, I started, this is just personal. It's just really just personal at this point.
Good.
So my little girl, Ileana, she's 17. She's got complex and profound disabilities. We have a list of diagnoses that I can go through. So she's got level 3 autism. She's termed intractable epilepsy, which is really hard to treat.
Tell us about that.
Pretty dangerous form of epilepsy. So she started at about 9 months old.
Yeah.
And she's had the type of epilepsy that has morphed and changed and has caused chronic brain injuries over a long period of time.
Hang on, epilepsy is capable of doing this, causing
100%.
brain injuries. The epilepsy itself, you can regress over time.
Yeah,
it's that powerful.
100%. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I think the key with epilepsy is trying to manage the seizures and reduce the seizures and reduce the impact that the seizures have on somebody's life.
Okay.
My daughter was born with Potocki-Lupski syndrome, which is primarily just a genetic chromosomal duplication on chromosome 17, right at the first cell dividing. So she had a recipe for Potocki-Lupski syndrome, and that was just the way it was.
Are you aware that most of our listeners don't know what that is? You're talking about things that most people have never come across.
Well,
so let's break that down and let's educate somebody out there that's driving a car somewhere. How do you even say this? Can you say it again, please, slowly?
Gosh, Potocki-Lupski is a broad spectrum syndrome. So there's some persons out there. So it's very rare. Ileana was one of the 5th in Australia to be diagnosed.
Heck,
So they
5?
Yep.
5?
So now that the testing is really good now.
Yeah.
So there's far more, and I don't know the numbers, but I know we were like number 5. And there was very little information about what this syndrome was. She'd been misdiagnosed a
At
number
5,
of
there's
times.
hardly any information.
Yeah,
you're looking to
it's-
the States, you're looking to
Yep.
Europe, you're
Yep.
drawing on every possible article
Yep.
to understand what on earth your daughter has.
Potocki-Lupski was born from a lab in Texas, from Dr. Potocki and Dr. Lupski. And there was a researcher there, and her name is Julie Centero. And I was put in contact with her very early on. Ileana was diagnosed about 3. She was had some features, and they got some testing. I think it was called like a fish microarray test that they brought over to Sydney Children's Hospital, and she was like one of on the top of the list of kids to be tested, and it's popped back up. She's got this rare chromosomal disorder. And they said to me, Amy, I know a couple of things. I know you didn't do anything to cause it. It's not your fault. Yeah, she was born like this, and that's about all we know.
That's all they gave you. Hang on,
pretty much.
They flew in gear from Texas. You're one of 5. Mm-hmm. They're trying to create distance between you as a mother of a 3-year-old that's got a diagnosis which is incredibly rare and people know very little about. You've gone back, you've checked with the 2 doctors and the woman that sort of manages that whole thing to drill down on it, as any mother does. Well, a good mother. You want to know everything you can. There's a lot going on in this podcast, and we're only a couple of minutes in. Are you aware of that? You are dropping a lot here.
This is a journey that is not isolated to myself.
Yeah.
This is the industry. You know, this is really the core of the disability industry. These are my story. This story is not mine alone. It's of many, many families out there. They've got complicated tales that are often, you know, it's a road that they've had to really cut the path themselves. And it comes at a cost. So I have this little child who's hard to manage. And nobody knows what to do with her. So I'm in a rural setting in Coffs Harbour, and I just drive backwards and forwards to Sydney Children's Hospital to try to navigate issue after issue after issue.
6 to 6.5 hours.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We were doing that 8 weekly. The story just will unfold further and further. Families like mine are profoundly disadvantaged, and they're also profoundly underrepresented. So our story's not often told. So at 3, I had this little girl with this really rare diagnosis. And when a diagnosis is so rare, they can't put it on paper. And if they can't put it on paper, they can't do what? Give you any funding. And so that was probably the first barrier that we faced. And that was a tough one. So we just kind of got to a point where it started to unravel. And she got a diagnosis early on of epilepsy. And that they'll tell you straight away, straight up, well, we don't understand it. We do everything we can, but we don't understand it.
Epilepsy.
And your child, Amy, is a little bit of a guinea pig. Lots of these complicated kids are guinea pigs, so we're just going to try, and we're going to try, and we're going to try. But when you're in a regional setting and you're prescribed a medication that doesn't work that well, and you're a mother, I was 25 or 26 at the time. I didn't have all the medical terminology. I didn't understand all the subtleties of epilepsy. I did the best that I possibly could, but the path was pretty tricky. So I would go locally to try to get help locally, and they would say, I don't know, Amy. The Children's Hospital is the hospital that is set up, designed for these kids. They've got neurological clinics you can go to. We'll send you down there. We'll get you specialists. But it did mean a lot of travel. Probably from a carer's perspective, it's really hard to hold a job down when you've got a little person who can't go to preschool because they're sick, and you're travelling back and forwards to Sydney all the time. So there's lots of barriers there. Oh, my God. And that's one issue. So families like mine have sometimes 5 and 6. Like within our household, we've got a number of big issues like epilepsy. Epilepsy is one of them.
Hang on. Here's a mum in a semi-regional area of Australia. The nearest help that has any integrity around it is 6 hours away.
Yep.
You're making this journey on a regular basis. Yep. It's exhausting. You're exhausted before you leave. By the way, you have to take a daughter with you that doesn't want to go on that car ride.
And my son.
And your son.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to go.
No.
And when all the local guys don't want to touch it.
No.
There's so many levels of complexity. Imagine if you made a wrong diagnosis. But there's layer upon layer. And there's something that's you're telling me you can't even put on paper? Probably the NDIS don't even acknowledge it.
They wouldn't have back then. The NDIS didn't exist. We came up under a different system. And a lot of families like mine did. The NDIS is a dreamland. It's like dream world for disabilities. It wasn't like that.
Oh, that's a good comment.
Yeah, it was, we were really brought up under a system that treated us that we should be happy to get any help at all. There was no such thing as support workers. There was no such thing as packages. But there was also no such thing for support for a person who's got a diagnosis that we don't know what it involves. And so the guys over in the States were like doing what they can to compile, they're doing all this testing to find out the barriers that these kids face. But the issue is that Ileana was like really on a significantly impacted end of the spectrum. And a lot of the kids that they were testing, that some of them could read, some of them could write, some of them could do things independently. So the information getting fed back was that it was a mild syndrome, and that made that really tough.
It's actually not what you want to hear as a mother with the complex, high level.
Yeah,
syndrome.
it was
Any
tough.
spectrum, when you're at the top end of it, is the tough end.
It was tough.
And everyone that's mild, you're like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah, I ended up, and I hope Julie doesn't watch this, but I ended up leaving the family groups that they had on Facebook back in the day because I didn't want to see it. Because we weren't there. And it hurt my feelings, and I couldn't connect.
The difference between mild and acute is a different world.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. And a lot of these kids were misdiagnosed. So Ileana might have been, perhaps they didn't have that gene testing and she was just diagnosed with a severe epilepsy disorder, and that was the reason why she was suffering with all of these other things. Who knows? A lot of the kids with Potocki-Lapsky don't have epilepsy. So, she's got a lot of things that these other kids didn't have as well. Makes it pretty tricky.
So there's this thing in you, and I can sense it across the table. You want to tell people about your story. The times were so hard when you were in regional Australia and nobody listened to you, and it's kind of screaming out of you. I can see it in your eyes. And you feel for every other mother or parent that's around there with a child that has a very small diagnosis and nobody knows what to do. And you've kind of gone through it, lived experience, but to the hardest degree. It is dysfunctional in families. It changes the dynamic. It makes it very hard for anything to be functional. That child absorbs so much of your time, energy, and love that there's nothing left for you. This is a tough gig. You must feel disadvantaged. You must be pissed off. Come on.
Look, to a degree, but ultimately, like, I've seen it the whole way along. Like, I just feel tougher.
Yeah.
Tougher than the gig. And I feel this responsibility to be a voice for that whole group of people just like me. That don't have it in them.
Oh, yeah.
For like, every organisation you've gone to that's let you down, for the medical system that's let you down, for the community and the culture that flows through the sector that lets you down, it beats you down. And people stop talking and they stop integrating into the community, and they stop feeling worthwhile, and they stop speaking up, and they become really underrepresented. And I feel like, gosh, if I could do anything, it would be to share my journey. And then perhaps some of the work that I've done, I do a lot of storytelling, and we make it into videos, and I share some of my story. And so that's maybe they could use my work to share with their friends and family how they may have felt.
So let's talk about that, because now we're pivoting. We're pivoting out of a daughter with a disability into an empowered woman that wants to create change. She's building a business and she wants to be impactful.
Furthermore to Ileana's story, she's
pay honour to that. Acknowledge that.
There's chronic medical complex issues there as well. Number one. So I feel that my family is a really good representation of the disability sector, who that customer can be. And I retrained as a nurse bedside with Ileana.
You did?
We lived in hospital, right, for a long period of time. We were in and out. And I thought, gosh, I'm learning all of these skills, I'll retrain. So I did. I retrained. And then I nursed for 10 years or something like that in the community and hospitals and theatre nursing, not great. And then I got a gig working in a community organisation in senior management in disability just because what I brought and the experience that I had. And it was actually that's why I started Disability Culture Cure Australia. That's why I started this company. Because I got into this position and I was like, gosh, someone like me, right? This massive organisation, I'm your customer. And if you just listen to me, we can affect change, and I can tell you where it goes wrong, and we can put programs in to upskill staff, and we can tell the participant story, and we can share that lived experience. But the interesting part of it is that that's not the culture of the sector. That's what I found anyway, is that there wasn't enough of me about, and I was this squeaky wheel that wasn't really making much sense, because that's not the way we've done it. That's not the way we've always done it. That's not the way we think. That's not the way we work. That's not how we train staff. And I started to kind of look around, and I'd go and I'd meet other senior management from other organisations, and I was like this unicorn, and people would say, oh my God, you're so amazing. You're just this unicorn. You've got a child with significant disabilities, and you're functional, and you're working, and you're trying to affect change, and you're trying to make a difference. And I kept looking around going, oh gosh, well, where are my people? Because this is our industry, is it not? And I started to, my heart over a period of 12 months started to sink.
Hang on. You've got this good job. You're in corporate Australia, and you've been brought in to change culture and acknowledge disability or acute disability. You've been labelled a unicorn. Everyone's fully acknowledging that you've done an incredible job as a mum, and yet you feel alone.
Yeah. I really did. And it was over that period of time of having services in my own home. And I'm not talking about 2 hours a week. I'm talking about 12 hours a day, and I'm talking about 3 to 4 shifts a day, 3 to 4 different workers a day. I need a good skill set. They need to provide really good care.
Hang on. Ileana's care requirements, let's run through them. What does the day look like? Oh
gosh, how long have you got?
The listeners want to know. This is context. We want to know this.
Ileana needs help to do almost everything.
Yep.
So she needs help to know that it's time to get up out of bed, and she's hooked up to a pump overnight that feeds her, because she's fed 24 hours a day into her bowel.
She's fed into her bowel via a pump.
24 hours a day.
The girl doesn't know real food. It comes in a tube and it goes into her abdomen.
Yep.
Okay.
So we disconnect all of that. We clean the equipment. We put her on the toilet. The whole time we're trying to empower her to do these things herself and to understand the routine and pattern herself.
You're trying to build a process.
100%. We're trying to
systems and process create freedom, right? And you as a parent, maybe you can go and make a cup of coffee. Okay, this is a pipe dream at this stage. Okay, so we've woken up.
We clean all the equipment, and then we set up. Everything needs to be semi-sterile because it feeds into the bowel.
Yeah, for sure.
And the bowel just doesn't have the same protective reflexes.
Doesn't it?
No, not
as the
stomach.
It's a long way through the process.
So it's
probably
a pedge, not a peg. So traditional,
pedge?
A pedge, P-E-J.
P-E-J.
So lots of the enteral feeding is into the gastrointestinal system, into the stomach. So it's a peg.
Yeah.
And this is a pedge. So enteral feeding is pretty rare, and then you slide into feeding into the bowel, which is even rarer. And you think from the support worker's perspective, this is a tough gig. They come in and they go, oh gosh, where do I get these skills from? Well, there's no training. I'll have to do it as the parent, so I do that. So we do a sterile setup. We have to set up all the medications for the morning, clean her up, get her dressed for the day, and it's a waking up. You are waking a person with level 3 autism up to the world, and we're talking and we're engaging her, and we're pulling her
energy.
out, pulling her out of her little world, and we're talking about the things we're going to do, and we focus on her jobs, which is looking after her animals, her bird and her dog. And
great.
She's got bunnies, and we've got horses. We've got all sorts of stuff there for her. She lives a great life. And then we set her up ready for the day about I don't know, we finish about 9 o'clock and then we go and do our thing. So on a day like today, we went to see a paediatrician for the last time before she's discharged to adult care, which is an animal unto itself. And then she went to physio, and then she came home with a support worker who they change over. And then they went about, she has a little rest, and then they go about the chores in the afternoon. And we try and engage her in all of that stuff.
Okay.
And then the day just winds down, so the process just reverses. So we do medications again. The staff need to have a sterile set up, and they make all the formula for the following day, and they set up all the feeding bags. And it's a different pump overnight, so they change all the equipment over, set all that up. She's got well-known workers with her now, and they'll stay with her overnight. Sometimes they buddy up, and there's 2 of them when I'm not there, which I think, fair enough. It's a big job.
There could be 2 workers stay overnight?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah. She's got a bit of an impaired swallow, so she's a bit of an aspiration risk. And aspirating is when you breathe food or fluid or whatever it is in your mouth into your lungs. And the problem being is that the lungs are just not designed for that. So try to cough it up, but it can just turn infective and become a pneumonia. And it's a big setback for Ileana or anyone. It's a big setback. So we have lots of positional supports, and staff know the sort of noises where they have to get up and roll her over and help herself and cough it up. And it's a really finite operation of just always watching and listening and monitoring, and we all work together to be able to work out if she's got what she needs, or do we need to go and get her chest checked or things like that. It's a big job.
Your home life looks like a myriad of support workers coming in, living under your roof, of which you don't know their background. Some do a good job, some don't. You sleep, but you don't really sleep very well. You're listening for a cough. Is it pneumonia this time? If it is a setback, that looks bad. What have we got tomorrow? How do we get it in front of the animals? That's just challenging in itself, and that is her great time of day. This is hard.
Yep. Disability can be hard, but there's also another side of the coin where I see myself, and a lot of the staff that work with her see themselves as the most luckiest people in the world, because disability brings so much more than I think we realise, and so much more than I think a lot of people within the sector realise as well.
Give us more. I'm loving this. Give us more.
Oh, there's just the most incredible lesson in gratitude. 15 minutes into meeting my daughter. She is very disadvantaged in this world through no fault of her own. She's got no language. She needs a lot of help. But she is the happiest, most grateful person you will ever meet.
Really?
She is present entirely. And she is the hardest worker, most genuine, sincere person I've ever met. And she doesn't ever complain. And she could.
Of course you can.
Yeah. The people that come into her life don't understand disability often. She gets judged harshly at times. She feels that energy.
Does she?
And she takes it in, transmutes it, and throws love back. And you tell me, you know what I mean? And the staff tell me as well, are we not the luckiest people in the world? How can you walk into your work? The girls say to me, how can I walk in here with all my rubbish of the stuff that I drag through, that there's an issue with my car, or my husband said this, or this isn't working, or I feel old, or I feel fat, or I can't do this. How can you bring all of that in and then be in the presence of someone who is just so genuine and sincere and happy and enjoys life, who faces the most enormous obstacles? I've said the whole way along, it's the best industry in the world. We just kind of need to talk about some of these bits. And that's this stuff, some of the storytelling, and it's this insight that DC Crew has built into those seminars, and that is what we bring into the workplaces. And it changes the way support workers feel about it. And sometimes, I've worked with them, so I've managed quite large programs with a lot of staff and a lot of participants, and I was often the go-to person where staff would come to me with their issues, and participants would come to me, and it was like the most valuable job in the world for the 18 months that I did it. And I took all of that with me and I built it into these seminars, and it's like exactly what DC Crew takes in when we visit providers. They bring the BDM and they have a discussion about what they need, and we bring this type of stuff into the workplace, and it changes the way their staff think and feel. It's a beautiful thing. That's what lived experience brings.
I think it's also your passion too. Lived experience is one thing, but the way you convey it is remarkable. Culture change in any organisation is a tough gig.
Yeah, it's a hard gig. 100%. It was the.
It's not a half-hour fucking presentation.
Do you know what? It was crazy, right? It was crazy. But I've said this. My son's nearly 20, and I've raised him since he was a little boy, because we had challenges like raising a person with complex and profound disabilities. Mm-hmm. Hands up, hardest thing I've done. Full stop. Mm-hmm. But I've always said the whole way along, like, it's your job to turn it into something beautiful. So I raised my son under this thought process that you can do really hard things. Mm-hmm. And we learnt that. My son is nearly 20, and he learnt this concept within jiu-jitsu. Okay. And if anyone, just look it up, just put it into YouTube. It's pretty popular at the minute. Jiu-jitsu, no-gi grappling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. This is a concept that runs through those gyms. It's a process of doing something really hard for a really long time and not giving up. And that's how I raised my son. That's how I was raised. And that's what we have taken into Disability Culture Crew Australia, because changing a culture within any organisation or any set culture anywhere is one of the hardest things you will have to do, and you can't do that with a weak spirit, because it's a boundary after boundary you're going to have to jump over and cross and smash down and turn around, and they're trying to build it up, and you've got to go back and do it all over again. It's a really tough gig, but I kind of owe it, don't I? Because I see that that's the way it needs to go. Someone needs to do it. I owe it to my daughter. I owe it to all the families coming up behind me. I owe it to all the families that have been there and that have done it. I owe it to them. I've kind of got the energy to do it. I don't think there's anything more important for me to do at this point. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, crazy as it sounds, it's all over our website, we're just trying to rebuild a more positive, beautiful culture. And that is really, I think the essence of that is just connecting staff with the community more. The disability community, connecting with the ground level working staff, executive staff, owners of all these organisations and agencies. If they could just understand their customer a little bit more, and understanding the beautiful side of it all as well. It's really, we're kind of owed. I feel like I've seen it in action, and I've seen where the holes are, and I owe it to my disability family, carers, friends, advocates, persons with disability of the past. For the future, I kind of owe it to say, okay, well, someone needs to do this, so let's just start having some conversations, and that's what we do. We take raw storytelling into agencies and organisations. Some of it is hard to hear, some of their hard conversations. We take beautiful stories in, we engage staff. We've started this apparel line, which is simply T-shirts, and all they have is messages on them just to start conversation. My favourite one says, I have a voice too, and it represents the non-verbal disability community, which is my daughter. She's a beautiful example of the non-verbal community. And it's just about, someone might be wearing the shirt and someone will say, oh, what's that one all about? And they can say, yeah, have you ever met anyone with who's non-verbal before? Do you know what? They're talking to you all day, all night. They're communicating constantly. Communication isn't just the way we think it is. It's just little conversation starters. That's all we're trying to do. And hopefully there's lots of families out there. My son, he He only wears DC Cruise shirts now.
Cool.
And they were designed by a streetwear designer. So they're good designs, but it's simply about raising conversation.
Last time they did this in corporate Australia, you're a unicorn. You didn't get the cut through. How you feel like you're coming with a toolbox this time. You've got all the lived experience. You know it's a tough gig. You know that the key relationship is between the base level worker and the person with disability.
Yeah.
You've created a brand which engages in a conversation, which is a great place to start. I think you're doing it. I think you're creating that change that you want.
Yeah.
At a small level, but it can grow.
Oh, we are. Yeah.
And I think the market's open to it. And I think you're going to succeed.
May
I can feel it.
May I just interrupt? Because
Please.
what happens, I've not gone to university for sociology.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I know a couple of things.
Yeah.
Is that the people who we've worked with or who work with us, we change the way they think, thereby sort of changing this culture. And then they want to tell other people. And that's the most beautiful thing, is that sometimes I overhear conversations, or they ring me and they say, I had a conversation and I'm seeing ignorance and I'm pushing back on it. And DC Crew have said, push back on ignorance, but do it with kindness. And it's working and it's happening. And it's just those providers who take the risk on us, which is really great, but we're going to do it anyway. So we're building brands all over social media. We make videos. We make all sorts of stuff. We're doing it anyway, whether they bring us in or not. It's working.
You're doing it through socials, whether they engage you on a consultancy basis or not.
Yeah.
The passion is so
raw.
Yeah. You're fucking doing it.
Yeah. Yep. We are. And
but when they get you, they get this. It's hyperdrive. You can change a culture faster, surely.
Yeah, 100%.
And whenever you hear somebody repeat back to you something that you've told them, you know you've succeeded.
I like to come into a room and I like your hard nuts that have been in the industry 15 years. And they
the
come
industry's
in
full of them.
and they sit there with their pen and they don't want to engage because
No eye
they've been
contact.
through all sorts of corporate training and they're sick of it and they're bored and they don't want to play the games.
So how do you break that? What does that room
Do you
look
know?
like?
Look, I don't know. We just go in, we do our thing.
What is
but
your
the
thing?
last
You need to tell
time
us.
we went in, I had him in tears.
Ooh.
And that was, it's the people that have been in the industry for a long period of time, especially when they came up under the old ADIC and DADIC system, which is the old model. And that was the culture of you should be happy with the help you get. And that really, a lot of those agencies that have been around for a long time with the block level funding, they really determine the services that participants would get. So that's where the culture is still in. So some of these...
You should be happy with what you get.
Yes.
Because I'm your overarching provider. And if I've given you slightly more than anyone else, you should be happy with what you get.
Yes. Yep. I can't do services at these times, but you can have them at that time, and that's all we can get.
And be grateful.
And we hold the funding. So we kind of dictate what you can do and what you can't do. Oh, you want to go swimming? Don't have any staff that can do it. Sorry. But we hold your funding. So moving funding back in the day, if you could even get it, I never got it. NDIS was really the first lot of funding we ever got. And I had a child, she was 12.
Hang on, you got your first NDIS plan at age 12?
Yeah.
Up until that time, it was self-funded.
100%.
The cost is phenomenal.
The cost was phenomenal.
The burden on you is phenomenal.
I can't tell you, like when I talked about medically complex, she also had little things like precocious puberty. And they treat that, if it's severe enough, with injections called Lucrin. And the hospital that prescribes them pays for them. And they're really expensive.
I can imagine.
Like $1,000 a jab.
Okay.
And her precocious puberty was really hard to treat. And so those injections got closer and closer and closer together to the point where they were monthly. And our local hospital, I don't want to say any names, but they said, we didn't prescribe them, we're not paying for them. So you're going to have to go to Sydney to get them. And Sydney had said, gosh, I'm sorry, Amy, but I can only give you one at a time. So I had to go down every month.
And get a new script.
And get a new
injection.
So, it's like, it's not only expensive, it's unfair and nobody listens. And I went to executive management and nobody cares. And then when you start to look at it as one issue on top of another issue, on top of another issue, on top of another issue, and these are the customers within this sector. So it's like, it's really important to sort of like, I've said the whole way along, like to understand where your customer comes from. Because we're not all like using NDIS to go bowling or doing all these fantastic things. Like, understand where they come from so you can connect with them. You can connect with the families a little more. And there's families like mine which they're tired. There's a bit of shame in it as well. They don't want you to know that they've struggled. They don't want you to know they haven't had a holiday. They don't want you to know little things like, in order for me to be in the workforce, I have to use all of my sick leave and all of my annual leave to trips to the Sydney Children's Hospital. And I put my hand up and I said I hadn't had a holiday for 7 years. And I didn't want anyone to know. It's a tough industry. And I think if the people within the industry that are caring for these families understand where some of these families come from, their level of service is different. And their support workers treat their families different. And it's a beautiful thing when you see it happen.
Yeah. Look, it's a very powerful message. I genuinely think if there's anyone that's capable of change, it's you. And it's partially due to your lived experience, but there's a passion, there's a burning. And the organisations that do engage you will undoubtedly come out better off.
They do. Yeah,
that's a given. I can see that. I mean, the programs are all various iterations of what you've lived, experienced, and we're talking about human interaction, human decency, and looking for the upside.
Yep.
And within any disability, there is an incredible ability, and yours daughter's will be the warmth and love that she conveys. And as she conveys just this feeling that you left at the door all of your first world problems, and there's something in that, and there's an acknowledgement, and there's something called being grateful, and I think there's a relationship between gratefulness and happiness, and it just may be that your daughter makes people happy.
You cannot hold on to upset, frustration, anger and gratitude at the same time.
Yeah.
It's been proven to be impossible. I don't know what study that was, but it's not possible.
You can't have those three in the same basket.
And when you have staff that kind of learn this within your organisation, they stay because they feel good. And there's this whole movement that's happening within agencies and organisations where they're losing staff. They're all going independent because they get a better quality of interaction perhaps with participants, or they can write their own rosters. But I think there's such security and safety within organisations and agencies. We need them. We really need them, and they need to hold on to their staff, and I know they're struggling to do that. And I want agencies and organisations to be there because there's a greater level of protection for both participants and staff. And that was some big barriers that I faced within the workforce when I was working for a large organisation. Was we were just watching staff out the door, and I'd be constantly asking them, why are you leaving? And I kind of feel like if those agencies can create an atmosphere where staff are allowed to feel gratitude, they're taught all of these things, they have all of these internal training programs that promotes this type of stuff, they stay. They don't want to do their own invoices a lot of the time. They don't want to write their own rosters. They want to be looked after. They want to be within agencies and organisations, but there's a little bit of a blockade there between the staff being able to truly connect with the customer, and it's got something to do with them not really understanding the customer. So that's really what we've done, is just created these programs to say, hey, bring us in and let us help you break down some barriers. Our first seminar is called Breaking Barriers. That's all we do. We have our mascot, who is like an 8-foot gorilla called Tiny.
I've seen him.
He's our jiu-jitsu themed mascot.
There we go.
Because, smashing barriers is his thing.
Yeah. Amy, I get the feeling that you are the catalyst for change.
I hope so.
I do. The things that you're talking about, it's not the first time I've heard about them, about this dysfunction between support staff and overarching agency that's operating perhaps back in the dark days, people wanting to connect. This is not the first time, right? And the good guys, the good providers have already recognised this and they're starting to bridge the gap. Do we need to do a lot more? Do we need more of a culture advocacy?
100%.
100%. And I've got to admit, I came into this not really knowing what the brand was. I am crystal clear now in what you do. And I love that niche.
Thanks.
I really do. I love it. And we come across so many disability agencies, some of which are incredibly good at this, some of which have got a long way to go. But the comparison is almost like to the old days when you should be grateful for what you get, to you said the NDIS is this utopia and people don't understand what it used to be like. The comparison between the support workers being unsupported, and you're right, that they are not people that naturally want to go out and get their own ABN and generate invoices. They're not. They want to be part of a community themselves. If you look after them, if you train them, if you invest them, then they are loyal. The industry needs a culture change. The top providers are already onto this. The mass market is nowhere near it. There are some large insular providers that this is a complete awakening to. They're still operating like 20, 30 years ago. The guy that broke down in tears, for every one of him, there's another one that's rigid and doesn't want to hear about it. I respect what you're doing so much.
Oh, thank you.
What you don't know is your intensity, your fire comes across in a podcast. It's a very personal thing. But the passion, that will never die. It's had 17 years of growing.
Yeah.
And you're going to throw that at this market and you will be heard. It's so good.
Oh, thank you.
Amy, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Remarkable guest.
Thanks so much for your time.
You've been outstanding. Guys, this was Able Pod. That's been Amy Gray on behalf of DC Crew. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
You're a tough, tough woman. You know that? One of the toughest.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye.